Africa's debt crisis is not a problem of mismanagement, nor is it about capacity. Yeah. In the morning, Professor was speaking about stolen bodies, stolen people, stolen strong people from this continent. It is about stolen resources, it's about stolen land, the continued plundering of our people, our land, our resources. And many speeches done before as well, that you have the neo-colonialist tools of debt together with aid, trade, and so on. So the deeper truth is that this crisis, this debt crisis, is rooted in historical plunder, systemic injustice, and ongoing exploitation. And now we're going to discuss power, politics, and people, Africanizing the debt crisis in a reparations framework. And for this, we're going to see it from a tax justice point of view, human rights, on labor relations, and so on. So to start us off, we have Dereje with us. Just a quick introduction about Dereje Alemayehu. Is the Executive Director, Coordinator of the Global Alliance for Tax Justice. Dereje has been a lecturer at the Free University Berlin for Development Studies and African Political Economy. He served as country director in different countries, including Burkina Faso, Tanzania, Kenya. The founding chair for Tax Justice Network Africa, as well as chair of the Global Alliance for Tax Justice. He's published 2 books and several articles. I think, I know that doesn't do justice to your long resume, but just a prompting question, Dereje. How can tax justice be framed through reparations? Thank you.
These are, by the way, my initial thoughts on the subject. We are yet to consult and discuss in our constituency about framing international tax reform from a reparations and reparative perspectives. I will also use this opportunity to say a few words about the link between tax justice and debt justice in Africa. The recent FFD outcome document highlights a troubling imbalance when commitments on tax are being played off against those on debt. The main actors blocking change appear to trade progress on one issue against the other. No meaningful steps were agreed on debt, while limited and symbolic language was included on tax. Some within the tax justice community viewed this rhetoric language on tax as an achievement. However, as my colleague Evelyn Wendo of TGNA pointed out at our global working group discussion on this subject, it was not any additional revenues mobilized through global tax reform will eventually be diverted to service illegitimate debt if nothing happens on the debt front. I brought this example up front to underscore 3 key points. Number 1, civil society cannot treat debt and tax as separate silos. These struggles share interconnected opponents, allies, and root causes. Second, Africa must recognize that progress in one area coupled with failure in the other is not a net gain. A win on tax but a loss on debt still results in the preservation and continuation of structural injustice. Third, coherence is essential. Africa needs an aligned approach to both debt and international tax reform. In both fields, reform must move beyond technical fixes, loophole closing, or palliative measures. The guiding principle must be structural transformation framed through the lens of reparative justice. Situating tax justice historically is critical for framing tax within the reparations discourse. The economic exploitation of Africa did not end with formal colonialism. It continued under new guises, give away investment agreements, tax-induced illicit financial flows, debilitating debt burdens. Africa's fiscal capacity has continued to diminish and be undermined. Structural adjustment programs entrench dependency on external financing and cartel sovereignty. Every year, African economies lose billions through profit shifting, tax avoidance, and illicit flows driven by multinationals and facilitated by tax havens and legal loopholes. The origin and scale of current losses illustrates that these are not post-independence anomalies, but the continuation of colonial patterns of resource drain, adapted to contemporary structures. Halting these flows is itself a form of reparations, as it stops ongoing plunder and returns resources to their countries of origin. Since this concept is new in our space, tax space, we must be careful in embracing it to avoid misrepresentation and misunderstanding when we advance reparations as a framing narrative. Reparations must not be considered narrowly as yet another form of fundraising for development. They should be understood as aspects of structural transformation. They should not be reduced to demand for fiscal inputs, but recognized as constitutive part of a struggle for systemic reform at all levels. In this sense, a UN tax convention in the making must be conceived as a reparative instrument, one that shapes global tax rules to redress historic injustice in the allocation of taxing rights. A transformative international tax system enshrined in the UN Tax Convention must be conceived as reparative in itself. It must be developed as an element of reparations for centuries of economic plunder. It must be designed to contribute to stopping the bleeding and restore fiscal sovereignty. The prevailing international tax architecture, like the broader global financial system, was constructed without Africa's voice. It was deliberately designed to safeguard the privileges of the global north. This is why international tax reform should be conceived as part of a wider transformation of the global financial architecture. Thus, the UN Tax Convention should not be about reforming international tax rules and standards. It should also be about transforming international tax governance. In this sense, the Convention must embody an element of reparative justice, restoring voice and agency in shaping global governance. For decades, Africa has been excluded from decision-making in global tax governance. To borrow the Apt-Afrodite slogan, Africa has been a rule taker, not a rule maker in this area. The OECD, a club of wealthy countries, has dominated this field, imposing rules while countries of the global south were sidelined. The UN-led process to establish a UN tax convention is a process in which all nations participate on equal footing. Reparations in this context mean more than revenue. They mean recognition, participation, and decision-making power for those who were historically silenced. It should mean putting an end to political marginalization in global economic governance. Finally, a lot of work lays ahead to situate tax justice within the emerging wider reparations agenda. Across the world, there are movements calling for reparations for enslavement, for colonialism, and for climate injustice. Just as the North carries an ecological debt, it also carries a financial and fiscal debt. Tax reform at the UN must be part of this broader struggle. Our struggle for tax justice should be connected to the broader quest for reparations across all domains of injustice. Africa must reframe international tax reform not only as a question of fairness in the allocation of taxing rights, but as a question of reparative justice. Africa's engagement for the UN Tax Convention should be part of its struggle to end systemic exploitation and repair systemic harm. In this sense, global tax reform undertaken through the United Nations can and must be seen as part of reparations in progress, transforming an unjust system into one that rebuilds and restores. If I have 2 minutes, can I have it?
You definitely have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Then let me add a footnote to my prepared speech. When the UN tax process, negotiations process started at the UN, it started by a resolution supported by the Africa Group and presented to bring the international tax rulemaking and discussions on international tax cooperation back to the United Nations instead of keeping it at the UN. And then it led to the resolution of formulating the terms of reference, which is now guiding the negotiations. When this started, the Africa Group was the vanguard. When we arrived at civil society in New York to follow up the process, we were awaited by all sorts of rumors. The Africa Group has fallen apart. The process has collapsed. We went into the room, what did we see? The Africa Group mobilized the G77 and pushed this through to bring about this process to its successful beginning. Why do I say that? Because, as you know, as an aging African, with all the frustrations we have in our continent, to see 54 African countries speak in one voice, countries which don't talk with one another on the continent were working together to advance an agenda. 54 countries voting together because the Africa Group can move something forward only if they are unanimously accepted. If Africa can do this on this question, it can also continue doing it on other areas. So, and then another thing is in the FFD process, one of the failures for advancing on the debt agenda was the Africa Group kept its loyalty to UN-led process and was calling for a UN debt convention. Unfortunately, it did not bring the other G77 countries on board. But Africa Group stood firm on this. So for me, it is a big recognition we owe to the African Union, to the African group negotiating this process, for bringing this to this stage. But from now on also, the challenges are, it is not time to retreat, it is the time to go forward. The political dimension of the negotiation should be kept alive. Africa should remain united. And as I tried to explain in my presentation, both reforming the international tax rules and reforming democratizing the global tax governance are elements of reparative justice. Even if it is not called this way, the effect is the same. So it is a good start in Africa. Let us not allow others from within and from without to derail it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.